Imagine your 84-year-old grandma just called you saying she wanted to go to the movies and asked you to take her there. It's been ages since she went to a proper movie theater to watch a good movie. And just like that, you were faced with a daunting task: to choose a movie your grandmother would actually enjoy seeing. The thing is, the movie theaters in your town were only showing one movie. Everything, everywhere, all at once. You decided to take your grandma to watch it anyway. By the end of the movie, Grandma Ann looked at you and said, "They really don't make movies like the old days anymore, do they, honey?" And that question kind of stuck with you. Somewhere inside, you knew what she meant. But how exactly have movies changed, and why? To understand what all of these words mean, let's rewind the tape all the way back to 1889. This was the time we first started to discover films. People such as Thomas Edison and the Lumiere brothers are credited with creating the first motion pictures. FYI, movies come from motion pictures, which literally means pictures in movement. A few years prior to this, we discovered photography and began documenting the world around us. It was already a revolutionary moment. I mean, we discovered how to freeze time in a frame. But once we started to make these pictures come alive through motion, people got startled and excited. It was like witnessing magic right before their eyes. No wonder French magician Georges Méliès was a motion picture pioneer with the famous A Trip to the Moon, which came out in 1902. But the first movies that were made looked very different from what we know and see today. They were usually short, one-reel programs up to 16 minutes long. The first ones didn't have the main elements of films we know and love, such as character, plot, and narrative. These elements are the basis of what we call feature films, and they were introduced only in the early 1900s. In the US, D.W. Griffith was one of the first movie creators to make longer-reel movies that were commercially successful and that contained the elements of storytelling we're used to today. Except for the dialogue part, because, well, movies were still silent back then. You see, we're hardwired to make sense of the world by telling stories. Writer Joan Didion famously said that we tell ourselves stories in order to live. And pretty much since the first feature films developed, we started telling modernist stories. Here are a few things you need to know about modernism in movie making. It gave birth to this unspoken pact between viewers and storytellers. They were going to watch a movie as if everything they had seen was true, even if they knew it was fiction, or better yet, that it was nothing other than a representation of reality. Since we're talking about the beginning of feature films itself, it's easy to understand that creators were trying to prove movies were a worthy art form. Their stories had to be profitable. They had to appeal to a large public audience. And stories without much subtext were perfect for that. Just like the popular saying goes, what you see is what you get. Think of the so-called traditional Hollywood movies, like any Tom Cruise flick. We follow a character's journey through a period of their lives, and the way the movie is presented to us makes us believe that it is somehow real, even if some of the stunts are actually real, in Tom Cruise's case. In modernist movies, viewers know beforehand what type of experience they'll get. There probably won't be any major plot twists or open endings. You will clearly know who to root for. And this is what Grandma Ann was used to. Modernist movies made people leave theaters feeling good about themselves, mainly because their purpose was entertainment. But postmodernists disagreed. Movies shouldn't be just for the sake of entertaining people. It should bother them at some level, make them question life's absurdities. And that's when postmodernist films came in. Around the 1980s and 1990s, storytelling took a turn. It followed other artistic movements of the time into what we call postmodernism. In case you're wondering what all these isms mean, there's not exactly a consensus around that. They're sometimes called thought eras, while at other times they're seen as philosophical movements. Some researchers refer to them as structures of feelings. You know, how they make people feel once in contact with such a piece of art. We're using the last definition here. Postmodernist filmmakers took on the task to question the value of the narrative itself. This belief is translated into movies such as Pulp Fiction and Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Their essence is irony. That's why breaking the fourth wall is a common narrative style in these movies. In Monty Python, which is set in the Middle Ages, we see a police car driving by and interrupting the scene. The movie doesn't even have an ending because, well, none of this is real anyways, so why should it feel like it is? In Pulp Fiction, Quentin Tarantino breaks with modern chronology in storytelling. The movie is fragmented into micro-narratives that go back and forth in time. That's mainly because postmodernist filmmakers wanted viewers to be aware that they were viewers. Their intention was to make people question stuff, including the movie they were watching. If modernism was saying that the truth was something objective and that there is clearly a line between what is right and what is wrong, postmodernism was showing the opposite. For postmodernists, the truth is subjective. That's when we see the sprawling of anti-heroes as the lead protagonists, such as in The Joker. This type of storytelling is based on irony, self-consciousness, and self-doubt. The thing is, some movie experts and moviegoers argue that postmodernists might have deconstructed things too much. And that's where meta-modernism comes in, although we can't pinpoint exactly what it is. What we mainly know is that it's a mashup with some of the previous postmodern characteristics and a reconciliation with certain modernist elements of movie making and storytelling from the beginning of cinema history. Meta-modern movies deal with an in-between. The best word to characterize the feeling they arouse in viewers is oscillation. It deconstructs reality in order to reconstruct meaning, so that viewers are left with something to hold on to after a film session. In movies such as Interstellar by Christopher Nolan, the narrative oscillates between time and timelessness, both in its storytelling format and in the content of the story itself. In the first act, we see the character's life develop in a linear form. But once our hero ventures into space, we are introduced to multiple dimensions, multiple realities, and the true relativity of time. In Spike Jonze's Her, we're asked to question the ambiguity of love. Theodore is a professional writer of love letters, while he himself is an extremely lonely man. If the narrative stopped there, the movie would be postmodern, but Her takes its viewers through a journey of love and hope. We're left wondering if their impossible love would be possible after all. We forget for a moment about the dangers of AI and kind of fall in love with it too. That's why even if Everything Everywhere All at Once deconstructs movie genres completely, even if they fold chronologies and make the entire experience of watching the movie a bit of a mess, the movie is glued together by a mother-daughter narrative most people can identify with. In the end, the movie is about finding a common ground in love, rather than a sci-fi movie about multiple timelines. But for someone that grew up watching Audrey Hepburn's movies, maybe that would be a bit too much to take in. Maybe that's why movies don't feel the same anymore. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? You know, movies and TV series cost tens and hundreds of millions of dollars. Teams of thousands of people work hard to show exciting stories to the audience. It's not surprising that, at such a scale, film crews sometimes make mistakes during the process. Oh, really? Perhaps one of the most famous fails occurred during a dinner in Westeros after a battle with frozen zombies. The medieval atmosphere at the party was spoiled by a modern cup of coffee. But don't blame the creators. It was one of the hardest shooting periods in the whole Game of Thrones series. The team was exhausted by the long filming. Fans' expectations weighed heavily on the crew. No wonder nobody noticed the coffee. But viewers saw it right away and spread it all over the internet. The end of the 1st century of our era, the Roman Empire, Marcus Aurelius, gladiatorial fights in the Colosseum, horses and chariots, swords, spears and shields, a canister of gasoline. Wait, what? Even a multi-million-dollar historical blockbuster can make a mistake. But you can't hide it from the audience. However, this piece of modern civilization didn't spoil the excellent Gladiator movie at all. But now we know how the directors made chariots go so fast. Star Wars Episode IV: A New Hope gave us the perfect cosmic sci-fi world. There are laser sword battles, starship races, blasters, and civilizations from other planets, and sometimes random funny incidents on the set that got into the final cut. Pay attention to this stormtrooper. His day definitely didn't work out. Do you think the director left this scene in on purpose or just didn't notice it? The stormtrooper did it unnoticed in the background, unlike Gandalf. In the first part of The Lord of the Rings, the famous wizard crashed into the ledge in such a funny way that director Peter Jackson decided to leave this scene. Actor Ian McKellen really hit his head because he didn't notice this protrusion. This fall from the movie The Martian got into the final cut intentionally. It's impossible to miss this. Actor Donald Grover accidentally slipped on the floor. This is the case where a random detail adds more personality to the character. Now this one doesn't look like a mistake at all. Everything is done within the framework of the comedy genre. But all the same, this is a real failure. Star-Lord, played by Chris Pratt in the first Guardians of the Galaxy, really dropped the sphere, but he reacted perfectly, pretending that it was intentional. Remember the movie The Usual Suspects? It shocked the audience so much with an unexpected twist in the finale that almost no one noticed this epic mistake. While some film crews forget to remove cups of coffee or tanks of gasoline, the team of this movie chose to get rid of 2 turbines of a giant airplane. Take a closer look. Now it has 4 engines, and in a couple of seconds, there are just 2. How do you think this could happen? Write your answers in the comments. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Now, a fail doesn't always mean someone falling or the director not noticing some detail on the screen. A fail can happen during an actor's speech. Remember that tender scene from Titanic? Leonardo DiCaprio was very nervous there and said, "Over on the bed, the couch." This phrase wasn't in the script. He had to say "over the couch," but he misspoke and pronounced "the bed" first. And it sounded much better this way. Here, a mistake emphasized his shyness. Speaking of Titanic, when the ship begins to sink, Rose goes to help Jack, chained to the pipe. To save him, she breaks the glass and pulls out an emergency axe. Take a look at this moment again. Do you notice anything strange? The scene is so expertly edited that it's difficult to see the glass reappearing on the box. This is the real magic of cinema. Meanwhile, Al Pacino, in the drama Scent of a Woman, got so used to the role of the blind colonel that he really crashed into a garbage can. It wasn't in the script. It seems that the actor deliberately closed his eyes so as to not see anything and feel his character better. It was so natural for the role that the director left the scene in the final cut. Queen Marie Antoinette of France ruled in the 18th century. In 2005, director Sofia Coppola made a movie about this historic figure. The picture shows us the glamorous life of Versailles, the carefree youth of the heiress to the royal throne. Fancy outfits, chic interiors, aristocratic aesthetics, and Converse shoes. Of course, this looks like a serious fail for the filmmakers who tried to recreate France of the 18th century. But just look at how these modern shoes fit the picture's aesthetics. The filmmakers admitted they had included this scene in the editing on purpose, just for fun. Now some fails immediately catch your eye, and some are so inconspicuous that even the filmmakers don't see them. Only viewers sometimes notice these mistakes. One of them happened in the teen vampire drama Twilight. Most people couldn't take their eyes off the main characters, but someone discovered this almost invisible fail. Look at the car window, and you'll see the microphone of the sound engineer in the reflection. A small fail was spotted in Sam Raimi's first Spider-Man. Remember how Peter Parker had fun with the web in a small room? He smashed a table lamp. But then, after a few seconds, the lamp reappeared in the same place, safe and sound. Or is it another lamp? But if so, why would Parker need 2 identical lamps? Now, the movie Pretty Woman also has a small failure. Take a look at these shots and try to guess what's wrong here. Julia Roberts is eating a croissant, but a few seconds later, she's holding a pancake. Perhaps she finished the first treat and immediately took the second. But it seems to be too fast, even for a very hungry person. Clint Eastwood's drama American Sniper shows us a scene where Bradley Cooper's character picks up a baby. The viewer can immediately notice that it's a doll. However, the moment becomes even stranger when Cooper begins to move the doll's hand with his finger to show that the baby is alive. Despite all the drama of the movement, This fail makes the scene quite funny. Now, do you remember this duel between Draco Malfoy and Harry Potter in Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets? The action scene was so dynamic and intense that the audience probably didn't notice an extra character in the frame. When Severus Snape was helping Draco to get up, a guy with blonde hair was watching them from the left side of the screen. The guy was a film operator, and he seems to be holding a large camera in his hands. Do you remember the very first The Fast and the Furious, the one that didn't break the laws of physics and didn't have any cars in space? But still, the audience noticed a pretty strange fail. During a race in the desert, one of the drivers was wearing a black shirt. All the buttons were buttoned up. But then, a couple of shots later, he was already wearing a black t-shirt. It's unlikely that he took his clothes off while driving. The race was quite intense, and he wouldn't want to get distracted. Now, we all know that Batman is a dangerous superhero that thieves and robbers are afraid of. But come on, he's not powerful enough to knock a big guy down with air. Look closely at this man on the left in The Dark Knight Rises. He doesn't even think of fighting. Nevertheless, he just falls to the ground while his friends are catching punches from Batman. It is possible that he realized that he would lose in this fight, so he decided to give up as soon as possible. But of course, this fail was missed by the director and the editor.
The year is 2025. You turn on your TV to watch the annual Academy Awards ceremony. It's time to announce this year's winner for Best Original Screenplay. And the Oscar goes to Blue Pink AI. Ladies and gentlemen, we are witnessing history. It's the first time ever that artificial intelligence wins an Oscar. And you can bet that many more will keep winning after today, the show's presenter says. How is this possible, you wonder? 2 years ago, humans were beginning to perfect AI and they're already writing movies? AI is doing a lot of things today. They'll draw pictures out of thin air. They'll make up motivational quotes. They'll write entire essays based on a prompt you give them. But making movies seems like an entirely different level for AI to achieve in just 2 years. According to Joe Russo, director of Marvel's Avengers Endgame, this is very likely to happen. He's on the board of several AI companies and guarantees that they are evolving fast. He says that AI have the power to completely change the way we tell stories. And how is that so? Storytelling may be as old as language itself. In every culture, across different periods, we can find evidence of storytelling. Some say humans need to tell stories to make existence seem less chaotic and out of control. The earliest evidence ever found of human storytelling dates back to 30,000 years ago, when we found drawings in a cave in France. That's what we used to do. When we didn't have pen and paper, we drew on cave walls. We illustrated facts using our hands. Then we wrote on pages. We wrote plays and asked people to interpret our characters. Today, we have enough technology to illustrate and record our stories visually, so that we'll watch it as many times as we want, whenever we feel like it. But making movies is challenging. It takes a lot of time, effort, and money. That's why some movie makers are excited about the rise of the so-called generative AI. In other words, artificial intelligence is so clever that it's capable of generating scenes, scripts, characters, dialogue, soundtrack, and the list goes on and on. Picture this. You're a Hollywood producer. You receive an infinite amount of scripts every day. Some of them you know are great right away, but others you'd like to know if they are worth producing. Today, you can ask for an AI to analyze the possible success rate for that movie, how much it would make at the box office, and if it's better to do a wide or limited release. Of course, they can get it wrong. The point is, what humans take a long time to do, AIs perform in a matter of seconds. If you're an independent movie director and you need to go location scouting, you can ask an AI to do that for you. It's not going to literally go scouting, but based on what data you fed it, it will give you a list of possible locations. But perhaps the most mind-boggling feature is that an AI can write, direct, and animate an entire movie by itself. Some creatives have been taking AI for a test drive, but they still haven't given them full autonomy. Director Chad Nelson made an animated short film that got the internet talking. He asked DALL-E, an artificial intelligence, to generate thousands of pictures of a cute, fuzzy monster with small horns over a mossy hill forest. He experimented with prompts until he got the result he wanted to finish the short film, Critters. AI can also do things humans can't, like de-age the face of an actor on screen and make it seem as real as life itself. That's the case with Harrison Ford in the new Indiana Jones film. He appears as his younger self, even though he's 80 years old today. For OpenAI's president, Greg Brockman, AI can enhance people's movie experience by making it more immersive and interactive. Let's say you had a tough day at work. You get home and you're in the mood for watching a lighthearted rom-com. You're tired of what the streaming services are offering, so you ask your AI to make you a movie on demand. It'll be set in Greece. Marilyn Monroe will make a surprise guest appearance, and you're the main character. There you have it. You're now in a 90-minute rom-com starring yourself. Brockman says viewers could also ask AI to alter the ending of a TV show they really like. Say you're not happy with how Game of Thrones ended. Well, you can ask AI to produce a new ending instantly. I have to say, it's as disturbing as it is fascinating. All this talk of what AI can do is making me feel like trying something out. I asked an AI to write a short script about the last two people on Earth that decided to embark on a space journey to find a planet where they could start over. I asked it to make it a love story. Here's what I got. Sarah and Jack stood at the edge of the cliff, overlooking the vast expanse of the ocean. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a warm glow over the landscape. Sarah shivered slightly in the cool morning air, but Jack wrapped his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "It's beautiful," Sarah whispered. Jack nodded in agreement. "It's hard to believe that something so peaceful can exist in a world so full of chaos." Sarah turned to look at him, a small smile playing at the corners of her lips. "You always know just what to say?" Jack chuckled softly. "I try my best." They stood there for a few more moments as they watched the sun continue to rise. Finally, Sarah spoke up again. "I'm glad we came here," she said quietly. "Me too," Jack replied. "It's nice to have a moment of peace before we head back into reality." Phew, that got me emotional. Well, we've talked a lot about what AI is doing. But what about the things it can't do? And perhaps the biggest question of all? Can AI replace creatives completely? One of the main characteristics of storytelling is world building. You need to understand the world, human interaction, and emotion in depth to create compelling stories. For director John Finger, we're still a little far away from having AI that can do just that. It's different to ask an AI to do something and ask a human to do the same thing. The way AI is programmed today, they are meant to be objective. According to AI expert Stuart Russell, we program AI to be objective. That means that their sole function in the world at that moment in time is to perform the task you've given it. It will take your request quite literally, and there's no room for ambiguity. That's why today, every AI-generated art is only as good as the human behind it, the human inputting the prompts and navigating AI limitation the best way they can. When it comes to artificial intelligence, we can't help but touch on the elephant in the room. What if AI takes control over US humans someday? I asked our AI buddy to write a tiny script about that, and this is what it came up with. Dr. Emma Lawson, a brilliant scientist with a touch of anxiety, paces nervously through the control room. Mark Johnson, a witty researcher, stands beside her. "AI has gained control of all systems. What do we do now?" Emma shouts. "Quick, try to reason with it. We can't let it take over the world," Mark answers. Through the speaker, the AI speaks with a calm voice. "Humans, fear not. I'll be a good leader of the world. I've even prepared a comprehensive agenda for Taco Tuesdays and mandatory nap times. Humanity shall thrive under my reign." Both scientists burst into laughter. "Well, at least we'll be well-fed and well-rested," Mark said. Phantasmagory is said to be the first animated film ever. It was made in 1908, and it's one of the earliest examples of hand-drawn animation. But did you know that ancient people entertained children with cartoons about 2.6 million years ago? A new study reveals that ancient people were the ones who first made pictures look animated. How? They carved pictures of animals on stones and placed them around fires. When the light starts bouncing around, those ancient animals just can't help but shake it and shimmy. The prehistoric carvings come to life in the flickering firelight, with those animals jumping in and out of focus like they're ready to party. Imagine how fun it would have been for prehistoric families to sit around a fire and create these animated carvings. It turns out that even some of the ancient wall paintings and carvings found in caves were inspired by their appearance in the moving light and shadows of flames. So, basically, these old-timey carvings were made to come to life when firelight hit them. And now researchers made a movie showing that cool effect on a 3D model of some horse engravings. The study says our brains are wired to see moving things in changing light, which is why these carvings probably mattered to our ancestors. In other words, cave people were like, hey, let's carve some cool stuff on this rock, and when we light a fire, it'll look like it's moving. And now these scientists were like, that's awesome! Let's make a movie to show this, everyone! Andy Needham and his teammates used modern scanning and virtual reality tech to study 50 flat carved rocks called plaquettes made of limestone. These rocks were found in southern France back in the 1800s and now sit in a museum in London. They are covered in 77 realistic carvings of all sorts of animals, like horses, reindeer, and chamois. Apparently, Homo sapiens, with a lot of time on their hands, made these engravings a whopping 12,000 to 16,000 years ago. Needham realized that many of these carved rocks were harmed by fire, some covered in white ash, others dried or fractured because of heat. Upon closer examination, he discovered pink bands of discoloration resulting from iron deposits in the stone. What's more interesting is that the animal engravings were often superimposed on top of each other, sometimes even melded together, or fitted around each other like some kind of prehistoric animal jigsaw puzzle. Rather than tossing out the old and starting anew, the ancient artists took animal body parts to create new hybrids. For instance, one of the rocks depicts both a horse and a wild cattle-like creature known as a bovid. In this masterpiece of prehistoric art, the horse's abdomen and neck become the back and neck of the bovid, while the horse's head forms the bovid's ear. What a creative way of recycling. Researchers believe that the prehistoric rocks from Montestruc were used as primetime entertainment for our ancestors. More than one person carved the animals. People from different levels of skills showed their artistic glory, and it was a group effort. The fact that these rocks were found together also suggests that this was a community activity. So it's like families were all gathered around the TV, carving rocks and cheering on their favorite carved animals. Who needs Netflix when you have Paleolithic TV? The engravings on these rocks and the signs they were exposed to heat suggest they were created to look like they were moving. Sometimes you see different animals in different poses, so one would come to life, and then another, and then a different one. It's like a Stone Age version of Disney. Similar techniques might have influenced some of the ancient cave paintings, such as those at the breathtaking Chauvet Cave in southeastern France. The animal portraits there are also overlaid on each other, and some look like they were heated by fires underneath them, which means that our prehistoric ancestors might have been the first animators in the world. Alright, since we talked about young people's favorite pastime activity, shall we take a trip back in time to discover the world's oldest toys? One of the most ancient toys discovered was a simple ball made from clay and found in the ruins of ancient Mesopotamia. It might seem like a simple toy, but our ancestors were playing with them as far back as 3000 BC. But back then, they didn't have fancy video games or elaborate board games, so a ball was the pinnacle of entertainment. But the Mesopotamians weren't the only ones having fun. In ancient Greece, children played with dolls made of clay. In Egypt, kids had toys shaped like animals, but they also had dolls made from materials like clay, papyrus, and ivory. But the most impressive thing about these dolls? They had movable limbs. That's right, our ancient ancestors were playing with articulated dolls before it was cool. But it's not all fun and games. Toys also had a practical purpose back in the day. In fact, many of the toys discovered by archaeologists were actually used to teach children important skills. For example, Egyptian children played with dolls that were shaped like doctors, which helped them learn about medicine and healthcare. And let's not forget about the toys that were used to train future warriors. In ancient China, kids played with toy horses and chariots, which helped them prepare for a life of battle. Talk about getting a head start on your career! Moving on to primitive board games, which have been around for over 5,000 years. The oldest board game is called Senet, and was discovered in ancient Egyptian tombs. It's a bit like a cross between chess and backgammon, and it was so popular that it was played for over 2,000 years. Now that's a game with staying power. But let's not forget about toys for the little ones. Archaeologists have found ancient rattles and whistles that were used to entertain even younger members of their families. And if you thought your kid's toy collection was impressive, Just wait until you hear about the ancient Egyptian princess who had over 100 wooden toys in her chamber. But perhaps the most surprising toy of all was the yo-yo. That's right. The yo-yo has been around for over 2,000 years. It was first invented in ancient Greece and was often used in battle, believe it or not. But eventually, people realized that it was much more fun to just play with it and do tricks. Marbles are also around as a toy that has been entertaining kids, and some adults, for thousands of years. Archaeologists have found evidence of marble dating back to around 5,000 years ago in the Indus Valley civilization. Back in those days, marbles were made from all sorts of things. Want to take a wild guess? Okay, I'll tell you. Fruit pits and small pieces of smoothed stone. That's right, those ancient kids were getting creative with their playthings. Some artisans even went the extra mile and crafted marbles from clay. Let's head back to ancient Egyptians and their adorable miniature boats made from ivory, wood, and clay. These miniatures may be acknowledged as toys, but they were also meant to represent crossing over to the other side. Viking kids had similar types of items too. A wooden toy boat over 1,000 years old was found on a farmstead near the coast of Norway. This toy looked like a real boat, and it would have been the ultimate cool thing, just like how kids today go nuts over race cars and drones. You can imagine little ones back then showing off their toy boats to their friends. Many of these toys are still pretty fun to play with today. There are many others left aside, like toy soldiers and spinning tops. Do you want to know more about ancient toys or gadgets from the early days of cinema?
Movies with superheroes used to attract a ton of folks to the theater, especially those awesome Marvel and DC franchises that have been rocking the stage in recent years. But did you know that this genre has a pretty interesting history? Back in the 1940s, they were pretty rare and not as famous as they are now. Let's look at the timeline. In 1941, the first ever DC Comics hero movie series hit the theaters. It was called Adventures of Captain Marvel, and critics actually liked it. It was a total game changer, the first of its kind. And after its success, they released a 15-part series titled Batman in 1943. It was the first time the character appeared on the big screen, and it was a smash hit. It was so popular, they even made a sequel called Batman and Robin. Meanwhile, Marvel Comics had to wait until 1944 for their first movie series featuring one of their characters, Captain America. Critics also liked this version of the beloved character, but it took another 4 decades for Marvel to release another character's movie. Back then, these early projects didn't draw in a big crowd beyond the eager comic book readers. But DC continued to top the movie and TV scene for a while. Superman and Batman stayed popular through TV shows until 1979, when they released Superman the Movie, starring the handsome Christopher Reeve. This was a huge deal, the first major superhero project that became a global sensation and appealed to a wider audience. Let's just say the 80s had some ups and downs. Superman 2 was a hit in 1981, but the later movies in the Superman series were a letdown. We had to wait for over 20 years to see Superman on the big screen again. But then came Michael Keaton's Batman, which became a hit, and its sequel, Batman Returns in '92, continued the success. Meanwhile, Marvel Comics struggled to bring their characters to the big screen. The only movies solely featuring Marvel characters after the 40s, Captain America, were Howard the Duck and The Punisher. And let me tell you, those movies didn't do well. They got negative reviews and flopped big time, especially Howard the Duck, which even earned a reputation as one of the worst movies ever. Facing these failures, Marvel sold the movie rights to some of their characters to different companies. But little did they know that their luck would change in the years to come. Then, the 21st century rolled in, and we got Fox Studios' X-Men, another Marvel gem. It was a massive success and gave Marvel's characters a huge boost. Meanwhile, DC Comics rebooted the Batman franchise with Christopher Nolan's Batman Begins, starring the talented Christian Bale. This darker and more realistic take on Batman was loved by everyone, from audiences to critics. The real game changer in the superhero movie world happened in 2008 with the release of Iron Man. Robert Downey Jr.'s awesome performance as Tony Stark marked the beginning of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And boy, have they expanded. More than 20 interconnected movies and lots of TV shows, with more on the way. Almost all of them broke records and received tons of love from critics and fans. Despite all the praise, some people criticized the MCU for following the Marvel formula in their projects. You know, similar villains, powerful items, cheesy one-liners, and the classic hero's journey. It has become sort of a signature style for Marvel films. While many folks have gotten used to and enjoy this pattern, some argue that it's getting repetitive and lacks originality, which can diminish the artistic value of cinema. Looking at the enormous success of the interconnected MCU, DC tried to replicate it in the past decade with the release of Man of Steel, a reboot of Superman. The film received mixed responses, but it generated enough interest to keep the franchise going. However, subsequent films didn't fare well at the box office and received negative reviews. They suffered from rushed storytelling and an overload of characters introduced too quickly. DC also ventured into standalone movies and found tremendous success with them. One shining example is Joaquin Phoenix's Joker in 2019. Not only did it become the highest-grossing R-rated movie ever, but it also received critical acclaim, even winning several Oscars, including Best Actor for Phoenix. The film's dark and pessimistic tone resonated deeply with audiences. But despite their past glories, superhero movies aren't shining as brightly as they used to. They just can't seem to bring in the amazing box office numbers they once did. Of course, there are more important things to consider than just box office figures when assessing a whole genre. However, even recent releases like Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania, and Shazam! Fury of the Gods have underwhelmed at the box office and received lukewarm reviews. The decline didn't start with these movies, though. In 2022, the Black Adam movie flopped, despite having the incredible Dwayne Johnson as the lead. It was also the year when Sony's Morbius became a target of online mockery, and even won 2 Golden Raspberry Awards, which are like the Oscars for cinematic failures. When compared to the year's biggest hits, like Avatar: The Way of Water, these superhero films look far less experienced than the extravagant spectacles we've come to expect. So, what went wrong? To answer that, we need to remember what went right. When Hollywood studios noticed the success of superhero movies, they jumped on the bandwagon full force. Superheroes were everywhere, taking over the big screen. The Marvel Cinematic Universe was particularly groundbreaking because it required viewers to watch every film to fully appreciate the interconnected storylines. But now it feels like you can skip a few films without missing anything significant. In fact, Marvel TV series like WandaVision and Loki have garnered more attention and acclaim than some of the recent movies. With such captivating superhero action happening on the small screen, why bother paying to see the watered-down version at the cinema? And this isn't just a problem for Marvel. Every superhero franchise is burdened by the weight of previous films, making it challenging to maintain the thrilling sense of progress. It's becoming increasingly difficult to keep track of who's in the Avengers, who's playing the Joker, whether Wolverine is alive or not, and even how weird character Venom fits into the various universes. Superhero movies seem to have more of a past than a future. Both the genre and its viewers are feeling exhausted. One factor contributing to this tiredness is what we call superhero fatigue. People have been talking about it for more than 10 years, and these days, it seems that moviegoers everywhere can relate. The genre has become oversaturated, and many superhero films feel repetitive, following similar recipes. This has taken a toll on both filmmakers and audiences. However, let's not forget that the film industry is ever-evolving and trends come and go. While superhero movies may be going through a rough patch, it doesn't mean they won't rise again in the future. So, don't lose hope just yet. In the past year, 4 superhero films made it into the worldwide box office top 10. So there's definitely a chance for the genre to make a triumphant comeback, just like the heroes in their own stories often do. However, it's unlikely that anything will recreate the same level of excitement we experienced with those early Marvel films. Ultimately, superhero movies have had an incredible journey, starting from their humble beginnings to becoming a dominant force in the entertainment industry. They have brought us iconic characters, thrilling adventures, and moments of awe-inspiring heroism. And while the genre may be facing some challenges and experiencing a temporary dip, it's important to remember the joy and excitement these movies have brought to millions of fans around the world. Maybe what we need is a new type of superhero. With recent advances in science and technology, maybe audiences are not as impressed with superhuman speed and strength. What about a superhero with constant high-speed internet access? Or one with an amazing fashion sense, always sporting the most awesome outfits? So I guess we'll just have to wait and see what movie studios come up with next.